As the host of Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, I am delighted to be able to bring you this podcast. My name is Wendy Lopez, and I would like to introduce myself to you. I specialize in helping people overcome their emotional blocks through different techniques, through emotional empowerment coaching and compassionate healing light facilitation. As a mom who has experienced narcissistic trauma, I help moms eradicate self-doubt in order to regain self-confidence to elevate their status both at home and at work. In our podcast, we discuss people's struggles, triumphs, and failures. We dive deeper into self-love, self-compassion, self-acceptance, and mindful, holistic tips. In every episode, I hope that you can take a golden nugget of advice and apply it to the journey of motherhood in order to raise your level of awareness. Welcome to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, where you find healing and creative mental thought advice from experts on past pain, narcissistic experiences, and trauma. And trauma, could be any type of trauma. And this podcast brings so many aspects of how life can bring trauma, how we can experience trauma, and how we can have events in our life cause trauma. So today we have DJ Nicholson, and she is and has been a teacher for coaches. She has been a teacher and she's been a coach for teachers and administrators. And then now she has her own business. So I'm going to let DJ allow herself to tell us who she is and how she got here.
Thanks, Wendy. It's so nice to be here. So I'm a 27-year veteran special education teacher, coach, and a trainer, and I decided to take an early retirement from the public school system because I felt like there was a disconnect between what was happening in the school system and what was necessary to support parents. So I have my own business, and part of my business is to provide coaching for parents so they can best understand how to support their child with a disability or a learning difference, be the most independent and be the most confident, and also understand how their child learns best in school in order to, maximize that independence and maximize confidence.
I absolutely adore this, and I'm so happy that you are here to share and enlighten us, not just from your experience, but how you really feel about this, that you created your own business on this aspect to help parents. And I know you and I have talked before the podcast when we first met. And I shared with you the story of how my kindergarten teacher to my 5-year-old created this thing where it kind of blocked my son's art creativity because he was only drawing stick figures at the age of 5.
Wow. Yeah, I have a lot to say about that whenever you're ready.
Yes. So this is why I feel it's so important to have this in the podcast, because like I mentioned, trauma can come from anywhere. And this is not just subjected to parents. This is also for children. But as parents, we are the ones that they look up to. And at that time, I did not have the knowledge nor the awareness on how to deal with such a teacher, right, and the teacher's mindset.
Absolutely. And so, so just the word mindset just brings so many things to light for me so that's obviously a very closed mindset, a very fixed mindset, in that, your child's teacher expected every 5-year-old to perform and work in exactly the same way at the same time, and did not take into consideration the fact that, all children develop at different rates. Yes. And truthfully, just drawing stick figures, I don't know about you, I still draw stick figures and I'm a middle-aged woman. So when it right. comes to, developmental levels and developmental consideration, yes, there's developmental standards for children as they age, but there also needs to be some flexibility there. And so in the case of your child, it was completely acceptable at 5 that he's drawing stick figures. I mean, the majority of kiddos that I've seen that are 5, you know, there's a head and there's arms and legs that come out of the head, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the other piece of that, though, you know, that you said you felt like it hindered his creativity. There was a hindrance in creativity. And that, you know, when that starts to happen at 5, that's very traumatic. That's very traumatic, because children at that age are naturally inquisitive. They're naturally wanting to be creative and express themselves and show what they know in a way that feels authentic. And so to say to a child at that age that, well, that's not how we do it, or you're doing it wrong, you know, that, yeah, so there's a squelching of that creativity, but also, you know, on the part of that teacher, you know, again, it's a matter of considering, you know, like where did that mindset come from? Does she truly feel like that? Is that her mindset, or is that something that was instilled in her because of a system that has these very, very rigid standards starting from a very, very young age? And I know that, you know, standards vary by state, but overall, you know, standards in our country are very, very, very similar.
Yes, and I'm okay rattling the cage a little bit about this, because I remember when we talked, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so with you on this cause. Like, I will, you know, help you whatever you need to help parents in this aspect, because I really want to focus on parents who, you know, me included, getting stuck with the mindset of the teacher, and then we draw in as if that's ours.
Right.
And so we allow the mindset of that teacher or teachers, because it happened with more than one, because I have 3 boys. So with the mindsets of the teachers, what happened with me was, I'm not a good mom. I'm not doing enough at home. I'm not enough of being the teacher at home for my child.
Yeah. And, you know, it's funny. I had a conversation just last week with a local parent here. You know, she's the mom of a 4-year-old, and she was so defeated because, you know, the preschool teacher was telling her that her child was behind. And so, you know, I hear what you're saying about, you know, parents bring their children to school, and the teachers are the expert in this area. I think that a lot of the time it's the teachers are almost given a mindset in that they have to do things according to standards, according to state regulations. But there does need to be some coaching and support for parents. And this, I really think this is where I come in. This is definitely an area of strength for me, that I can share with parents, like, listen, this is what you're told, but that's not necessarily what's true. So I like to be that person that kind of bridges the gap between what's happening at school and what's happening at home, and how we can make adjustments on, you know, how does your child really and truly engage? What's the best way that we can discover that your child engages? And how can we share that with the teacher and shift and grow her mindset a little bit? How can we share the strengths of your child? How can we take what you as the parent know to be their strength? Because, you know, parents are the first teacher of of children.
Absolutely.
You know, they know their kids the best. So how can we take what you know to be the strength of your child, how they engage, how they play, their creativity, their powerhouse little systems? How can we take that energy take what you know that's really positive and amazing about your child. How can we share that and turn that into something positive that goes back into the school system? So, just an example of, taking it back to, the drawing of the stick figures. And so the drawing of the stick figures in kindergarten, that might be part of writing. It might be part of how they're, documenting a story.
Yes.
With their writing.
Right.
And I have strong feelings about the idea of writing at that age, but that's another topic.
Oh, yes.
So it's, but it's one of those things where, okay, so, children are not all designed the same at all. I mean, every single child is different. We're different as humans. So there, to me, there's nothing wrong with, okay, if your child isn't ready to draw a stick figure or a person, as long as they are representing what they know, they're representing their knowledge, and that's how they're showing what they know. So even if it was something as simple as maybe they're not even ready to work with a pencil at all, but they can take a picture and they can glue a picture onto a page.
That's true. Yeah.
And so I love the idea of helping parents understand that it's not about putting kids all inside the same box and expecting them to do the same thing all the time in the same way. It's how can we support parents in helping their kiddos know how to best show their knowledge.
Yes.
And so, even with writing, if your child is not ready to write, there's nothing wrong with, using pictures and be able to say out loud what it is that's showing on the paper. It might be something as simple as if your child is writing, that maybe they can't take their idea from their head to the paper, but they need that oral practice first. They need to be able to say what they want to write first. Maybe they write it, maybe somebody else writes it for them. But there's so many different ways. And I think that when I look at those different ways and I help parents look at those different ways, they become stepping stones to ultimately where, the system decides, where the child should be. But that there has to be, we differentiate as educators in order to get students where they need to be. And I think, when we try to force students to do things when they're not yet ready, that's very, very traumatic. It's traumatic.
Yes,
it's traumatic for kids. It's traumatic for parents, going back to what you said about feeling like, that you're not enough and that you're not doing a good enough job as a parent, where, I do think that there is a disconnect between the educational system and the parents. Parents are not doing anything wrong. I mean, they are raising their children. They know their children, but there are just things about education that parents need to know in order to then share that information with teachers in order to ensure that their kiddo is the most independent and confident. Because the worst thing to do is to knock the wind out of a kid's sails when they're 5 years old. It's terrible, but it happens. It happens. And I feel like it happens and parents don't know how to respond.
Right. And one of the things that you said earlier was helping the children with their, helping the parents with the child's learning difference and how they can best learn at school. And so with the system, it, puts us all in like a cookie cutter. And I find it amazing that, we all go through the same system, but then when we go into adulthood, we all have different careers.
Right.
So that means that all of us perceived differently, had different likes, and we expanded on what our uniqueness is. But when we're little, that uniqueness is stomped on because you have to meet the standards. You have to be at the speed. You have to, the stats that they have. They get encompassed, and so then that makes it seem like the child has a learning disability, because
Right.
all three of my children, boys, were tested, and they all came out fine.
Right. And so, when I think about the standard, there are many, many ways to get to the standard.
Yes.
And I just from the teacher and the coach and the trainer perspective, I understand the need to have standards. I understand that. What I don't understand is the rigid expectation that every kid is going to get there in the same way. And so I think that there's a tremendous lack of knowledge on how to support different ways of thinking in children and different ways of accessing information. So one of the things I love to share with parents is, how kids can use, classroom assistive technology, how we can use supports that are readily available in the classroom.
And is that one of the things you help parents identify how their child's daily school experience can affect their home culture, or how the home culture can support? Because I feel like there's a balance between the experience from school, experience from home, and how the child doesn't get stuck in the middle of it.
Well, and when I was thinking about this yesterday, I think that students spend 7 to 8 hours a day in a school setting. And so what happens during that time greatly affects then what happens at home. So I think, if we can help children in that school setting be independent and confident, then when they come home, there's less anxiety and less angst about what just happened at school that was either negative or degrading or inaccessible for them. So I think when we can balance out what happens at home for support and what happens at school for support, then we can kind of marry those two things together. So it's the child that doesn't get stuck in the middle. And I guess my a good example of this would be a lot of parents at home, whether their child has a disability or not, there's routines. There's routines in the morning for how they get ready. How do you get dressed? When you go into the bathroom, do you brush your teeth first? Do you comb your hair first? Like what do you do in the morning as a routine? Same thing with bedtime or when they get home from school. And so some of that can be flexible. I feel like, when kids get up in the morning, does it really matter what happens first? Do you know what I mean? And to have some flexibility in those routines and giving kids that choice. And I think when we can at home, when we can give kids a choice in how they want to have their routine structured. So, I mean, obviously as parents, we need to have routine, but when we build those routines and we give kids an option to decide what to do first, they're much more likely to buy into those routines. And then also that's something that they can do independently and take the pressure off of the parent. I think the same thing happens with school, that if, within a classroom, if they have, 3 tasks that have to be done, do those tasks all have to be done in the same order? And if they don't, let's give some freedom. Let's give some freedom to say, like, okay, you've got these 3 things to do today. And I know that's hard. That's hard for, teachers and administrators to wrap their minds around. But I'm a firm believer that if we give kids more flexibility, we teach them about flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
We'll start to grow kids that feel that sense of empowerment, that they're like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
can make some decisions here. And they're not being stuffed inside the box of like, okay, you need to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And it becomes this like soldier routine
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So a lot of it is just, giving kids more options in that, those routines, both at home and at school.
Right. And I love that you touched on if we are able to do like routines and um, keep them balanced at home and at school, they don't get stuck in the middle because there's a balance, right? And
Right.
and and like you said, whatever they experience at school, they're not experiencing that at home. There's less angst, right?
Right.
So, but it's still important to have a routine at home so they can follow through whatever they need for school. So it's like helping them find that balance.
Right. Right. And I think, with routines at home, if you have a routine, it can take you 5 minutes to do something. But then if you don't have a routine, it can take you 15, 20, 25 minutes. And then there's an argument, and there's a power struggle potentially with a sibling or another parent. If the
Mm-hmm.
routines are developed, then that is just something that happens, that then, if a child can do that independently, the routine is done, and then that frees them up to play or be creative and do what they would naturally do, as a child. And it's just so sad that schools really do kind of strip away that creativity, and
Mm-hmm.
while parents don't have as much control over what happens in school, they can certainly take ownership of that at home, even when it comes to, whether it's homework or talking about something that happened in school, or doing some kind of review, or growing, their kiddo in an area that might be like a weaker area, or an area that needs more development, that they can be creative in how they do that. And I think that's kind of where I come into play too, because as a teacher, I was fortunate enough to be a teacher when things were not nearly as rigid. So I was one of those like creative, wacky teachers, and I loved it. And I had the freedom to do that. And I think that that's important for parents to know, that, learning is supposed to be fun. Learning is supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
fun. Reading is supposed to be fun.
Yes.
And that there are ways, there's ways to do that where it doesn't have to feel as rigid as it does at school.
Oh, yes. And I love that you mentioned that for parents, because this is my experience is there's so much rigidity, that rigid mindset. The parent grabs that rigid mindset and it brings it to the home. No, you have to do it this way, instead of making it a fun collaboration between the parent and the child,
Right.
right?
Right.
And now, for someone that has children with disabilities, can you explain like what part in that? What does that mean? What kind of disability you work with, or that you help with, support with?
So my primary area of focus is working with parents of children that have learning disabilities or cognitive disabilities.
And what does that
And
look like?
so a child with a learning disability, do you want me to define
Yeah.
them?
So,
Okay. Oh, sure. Okay. So a child with a learning disability might struggle in one or more academic areas. They might be maybe 1 or 2 grade levels behind their typical
mm,
peers. So they might struggle with reading, either all areas of reading or one particular area. They might struggle with math. They also might struggle with organization and just general, what we call executive functioning. So how they work within a certain environment during the day. What do they need to get organized? What kinds of routines do they need to kind of keep them on track? And then so for kiddos that have an intellectual disability, those are kids that have, they have a lower IQ. They struggle more
mm,
with processing and learning, and those are kiddos that would have a modified curriculum. So their expectation is different. And then, I help in that area too, to determine, how can I best support parents in understanding how their child with a cognitive disability could be included in a typical, general education classroom. I think in both situations, whether it's a modified curriculum for a kid with an intellectual disability, or children that have learning disabilities and their learning is accommodated with accommodations on their individual education plan, I think it's having those conversations on, with parents on, what can we do to make your child feel more successful? What are some things that can be implemented? And so this goes back to, what I was mentioning earlier about assistive technology. What are tools and supports available in the classroom right now? They don't cost anything. They're in the classroom. They're on the computer. There's programs. There's items there's graphic organizers. There's slant boards. There's magnifying glasses. There's highlighters. There's highlighting tape. There's flexible seating. There's programs that on the computer that read a passage to you if you're not quite yet reading at grade level. I mean, there's so many tools that we can use both at home and at school to make kids feel more successful and also make them feel independent and confident in what they're doing.
Yes, so important for that. And I love that. And how can we support parents in giving children more voice and choice at home? And how can we maybe give them might be teetering-tottering a little bit here, but having them have also a voice at school from a rigid mindset from teachers? It was a two-part question.
Okay, so I'll tackle the first part first. So I love the idea of voice and choice. I think that it gives them, again, it helps them buy into some of these systems that we have in place at home. So being flexible with homework. Like, do you give them choices? Do you want to do your homework as soon as you get home, or do you want to do it after dinner? Same thing with chores and other responsibilities at home. Do you want to make your bed, when you first get up, or do you want to make your bed after breakfast? Just giving them that flexibility and like I mentioned earlier, the voice and choice with with routine, the morning routine, the bedtime routine, how they set the table. Here's to give them, once you teach them how to set a table at home, to then say, okay, this is your job. And, and give them, plates, napkins, and forks and things. And then they can set the table however they want. It doesn't matter if the plate goes on first. They put the napkin on first, that's fine too. But just to help them understand that not everyone does things the same way. And that if they choose to do something in a different way that's still going to have the same result, doesn't mean that what they're doing is wrong.
Right. Oh, I love that.
Right. And so I think, that also connects back to school. And I feel like, if we can empower parents in understanding what's possible for their kiddo at school to be successful, I think we can then in turn help kids feel more empowered to say, I really need to go sit in a different spot in order to be more focused. I'm not comfortable working in a group. Can I work with just one partner? To have kids, while they do have to work inside the framework of a classroom, I do believe, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent with this, but I do believe the framework of a classroom is so unbelievably rigid. right now. And I would not say 100%, but the vast majority of what I'm seeing and hearing, it's very rigid. And so, kids don't have the confidence to be able to say, I want to do this, and to be able to advocate for themselves. So I think if we can help them at home, understand that, there's multiple ways to do things, and it's okay that if we can teach that at home, and it then can, hopefully, bleed over into the classroom where, there's more flexibility, and kids can say, hey, or at least, for kids to have tools that they know how to use and have permission, so to speak, to use them.
And I really wanted to land with the audience and the moms to realize that what you said about there's different ways of doing things that can get you the same outcome.
Absolutely.
Right. And I really wanted to land with the moms that not to take in that rigid mindset, because it's disallowing from the child. And I'm speaking from experience because I didn't know what I didn't know, but it takes away that choice for them to choose to find a different way, maybe to draw, to find a different way to tell a story. Right. And so we're unique. We can't be expected as, there can be that comparison. Oh, my son isn't as smart as my other son, or so and so is smarter. The comprehension is very different. But even though the comprehension is different, that you have tools that they can ask for your help to see, how can I help my son go from where he's at now and make him where he has the confidence that however they're teaching at school, but that you can have the tools to help them in a different way that the child needs.
Right.
Absolutely. And one of the things that comes up just recently, so I work with the coach, and she has this saying, done is better than perfect. Okay, I'm 49 years old. And that wasn't sitting well with me. I'm like, I'm working on another project, and I'm like, no, it has to be perfect. What do you mean done is better than perfect? No, it has to be perfect. And I had to really go think, where is this coming from? This was stemming from taking tests at school, and it has to be perfect or else I'm going to fail.
Sure.
And I thought, wow, what if now I'm at this stage in my life where I can get it done, and then if it's not right, I can give myself another chance.
Absolutely, because you're also giving, you also give permission to go back and make adjustments.
That's right.
Perfect. When we expect children to be perfect, and, kids hear this all the time. I mean, and teachers don't do this intentionally, but there's always that, oh, well, that's the high group, that's the low group. You got an A, you got a D. But that's been floating around for oh my gosh, probably a century. But I don't know. I like to look at not necessarily the end product or the end results. I like the process. And being creative and making adjustments through the process. And so, I love to focus on tools to support kids in the classroom, helping kids feel organized and empowered. But I also love to focus on reading, because that is, there's so much conversation out there about reading and how we can be, creative and more focused in how we're supporting kids with reading, how we're meeting their needs as a reader and meeting them where they are and getting out of that rigid flexibility, but helping them celebrate the process along the way of becoming a fluid reader.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yep.
So is there anything, any other tips you want to address with the audience? Anything that you want to say before we close this session here?
I think I just want to, just continue what you said about the moms of children, especially moms of children with disabilities and kids that learn differently. Your children are beautiful and amazing and creative little people, and please don't let a system tell you anything differently. Children are amazing. Children are amazing, and there's a lot out there that is very supportive for moms, and I hope that you can find strength in all the positive and amazing work that you're doing with your kids. You got this, Mama.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And DJ also has an Empower Parent. Is it a coaching program?
It is a coaching program.
Yes. And what I want to say about that, working with DJ, would be if you are empowering yourself as a parent, and the podcast is about bringing awareness around trauma. But if you are empowering yourself, you empower your child. And if you empower your child, then your child's adulthood into career, into who the person he's becoming, she's becoming, comes from an empowered place. So we make the difference. We get to make the choice of how we want to help ourselves as parents so we can support our children and have a better and healthier generation to come with the education. So I want to appreciate
Awesome.
for being on here in your presence. And you have a website, and I loved your website. Can you tell us what your website is?
Sure. My website is www.inclusiveology.com. And on there's a tab that links to my parent empowerment coaching. And for your listeners, Wendy, I would love to offer a free 45-minute coaching session where we can go ahead and tackle an individual concern that they might have, or take a look at an assessment to find out really where we can make some adjustments in that independence and confidence for your kiddo. And in that way, it builds this beautiful balance between, what happens at school and what happens at home. So all my information is there. There's a link to my calendar. Would love to talk to some of you mamas.
Beautiful. And I'll be posting more links on how you can, I know you do a lot of videos and you have a Facebook group, and I'll be posting that as well. So we can share that and they can learn, because I know you show up weekly. So that's great information to have and to get to know you. So I want to thank everybody for listening, and may you take a golden nugget and apply it into your life.
Love it. Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast. If you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. It would also mean the world to me if you're able to take a moment and rate and review my podcast on how it was helpful to you. Also, please connect with me on my social media platforms. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next episode.